We're in a very dangerous time. Stress from the fire in the sky, which is what the sun has become. I am not seeing deterrence here. I am seeing an offensive. This is the danger point for World War III. Nostradamus was born in 1503 and died in 1566 in the High Renaissance of France. If he had not written anything about prophecy, he would have gone down in history as one of the most famous plague doctors, which he wrote extensively about. He single-handedly fought the plague in 1548 in Aix-en-Provence for 270 days. And there was a famous recollection of his where he was checking the people in one of his patients, and he noticed that two were dead inside the window. He could see two were dead in shrouds, and the third woman was sewing herself in her own shroud. And that was quite traumatic for him. You know, he did many other things in prophecy, but we know him for the prophecies because he set it up so that people would always be debating about it. He once said, if any skeptic is against Nostradamus, one of the things they cannot deny is what he predicted about himself. He said, "I shall become far more famous after my death than I ever was in my life." Nostradamus started his career in prophecy with his infamous prophecy, well documented, of the death of Henry II of France through a jousting accident. He would say that he would be pierced through a gilded cage. Now, Catherine de' Medici, the Queen of France, was already anticipating a lot of this, as were many people in court. So much so that when the prophecy of the jousting stick going through the gilded cage of King Henry's helmet during a tournament, when the news came of his death, which he said would be a horrible death, which was, the man who accidentally killed the king said, "Cursed be he who predicted so evilly and so well." There was a crowd, a mob, that came to the church justices' offices of the Roman Inquisition outside of Paris, and they demanded with their effigies of fire of Nostradamus that he should be burned literally. Here are some of the most amazing prophecies of Nostradamus that even skeptics have to face. The 5 prophecies about Hitler, he talks about how he'd be beset, he'd be thrown into a cage of iron, and no one would know really what happened to him. Now people go, cage of iron, he died in the Führer bunker. Yes, he did. But I came across photos of the Führer bunker under construction. It was a vast 2-story cage of rebar in a big hole. Maybe Nostradamus saw it under construction before they put the cement on. One of the greatest prophecies fulfilled by Nostradamus in our time was about 9/11. It started in the year 1999, 7th month. From the sky will come a great king of terror. 7th month used to be September. And it's been moved to the 9th month. So he's really saying 1999 and September month. 1999 in a reverse anagram number is 9111 for the date. What also happened is, there's 2 other quatrains to talk about it. At 45 degrees latitude, the sky will burn, fire to approach the great new city. Now, it's a city that he also talks about it being at latitude 45. In Nostradamus' day, he's talking about a great metropolis that did not exist in his day. And even though there's a vulgarity of longitude not existing in maps of those times, so latitude could be off a few degrees, it's very close to New York City. And there's no other city that did not exist during his time that fits that latitudinal position. It also is an explanation, a double entendre, for how both jets went into the first tower and the second tower at 45-degree angles. You can see the silhouette in both buildings. And then there's something more recent, a space disaster, I would say. 9 will be set apart from the human flock, separated from judgment and counsel, their fate to be determined on departure. Kappa, Theta, Lambda, dead, banished and scattered. Now, I think this is about the Challenger disaster, when at the departure, about 93 seconds after it was aloft, it suddenly exploded. Now, there weren't 9 people in it, there were 7. The key is the final line. Kappa, Theta, Lambda are Greek letters that stand for, in Latin, TH, K, and L. If you put them into a proper order, you get another example of how Nostradamus can be hiding the vowels. THKL is missing the I, O, and O of Morton Thiokol, the manufacturers of the O-rings that caused the destruction of the Challenger as it was lifting off. We're in a very dangerous time, and Nostradamus may have described the clue to what could unravel this into a greater world war. He said, the two will not remain united for long. He's talking about, and it is Aquilon prophecies of the great eagle kings of the north. They are the eagle king totem of the bald eagle of the United States and the double-headed eagle of the president of Russia. So he's talking about this current situation, most likely. So he talks about how they tried to be friends at the beginning, but not for very long. That they would not make it to be friends. And that is what's happened between Russia and the United States since the end of the last Cold War. Then there's supposed to be a new Cold War, and there's going to be a period of 13 years, he says, that this war will go hot when they give in to a barbare vassal. That barbare is a French anagram for de Arab, an Arab vassal. There will be such a great loss on both sides that one will bless the bark of St. Peter and the Cape. Now, this could be Nostradamus' allusion to a prophecy that 2/3 of the human race would fail in such a war. Fail meaning be consumed. So the 13 years actually has a countdown. Nostradamus had this remarkable ability to count periods of time, but he never gave you the start of how to count it. So we have to find that out. Well, I think we may have found it out now, because when there was the violent coup that a lot of people in Russia thought had placed by the United States intention a fascist regime in Kiev in 2014, that created the Cold War that we're in, the Second Cold War. And in 13 years, that means that we're 10 years into that 13-year count, which could mean that in 2023, 10 years later, is when we really start heading for this Cold War turning hot. And of course, that would mean that between now and 2027, this is the danger point for World War III. The main incidences that are happening in the end of 2023 and primarily in 2024 are quite significant, even to the point of having a regional Middle Eastern war. Nostradamus has pinpointed Persia, Iran, has pinpointed also Syria, openly describing the Syrian civil war and how that could also be a part of this. It is clear that the neoconservatives that have overtaken the State Department in this current administration of President Biden are seeing that they're running out of time, that they need to, that long list of nations that were supposed to be overthrown, that the neoconservatives have been making the list since early 1992. Now they have a chance to go after the Big Apple, Iran, and its assets, Syria and Lebanon, as in Hezbollah. And when I see 4 aircraft carrier groups converging upon the Middle East, given that I've written extensively about the potentials of a war with Iran, I am not seeing deterrence here. I am seeing an offensive. I've been writing since 2006 about the great danger of a number of prophecies of Nostradamus that come really into the clear which he rarely does unless it's something very important that we need to heed or avoid. And that is a war with a Western power in the Persian Gulf with Iran. He even describes the place where the battle will happen, Kamara. Kamara is and the Arabian Gulf. Kamara is the 16th century name for the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz, where all the 20% of the oil goes in and out to the world. He talked about a great naval fleet melted and sunk by the Trident or foundering in the Arabian Gulf. So a fleet is sunk. Whose fleet, we don't know. And Tridental can mean Trident, as in all the Trident submarines that are now leaving the United States and heading towards that area. That could be what it means. But there's also a play of flags in Nostradamus' prophecies. This fleet is the fleet he calls of the true serpent. Now, the year after 9/11, President Bush had all warships, the United States Navy, fly the Navy Jack. The Navy Jack is a 13-striped flag of yellow and red stripes with a rattlesnake on it, and it says, "Don't tread on me." I believe that's the flag that he's talking about. So he's talking about the U.S. Navy. The other flag that is involved here may be in that riddle of the Tridental, because it means trident. If you look at the Iranian flag, at the white strip, where in the center is the abstract of the tulip, the red tulip of the martyrs, you will notice that from the two buds of the martyr that are disattached, if your eye goes to the center of that abstract, it is a trident. There are many, many prophecies in Nostradamus about global warming, climate change, rising oceans. There's one, for instance, where he talks about a great drought that happens around at the latitude of 45 degrees in the northern hemisphere, at the end of Cancer, which would be the end of July, which is the hottest period in most temperatures in northern hemisphere for summer. It's so great is this drought that fish in the sea and river lakes would be hectically boiled. I have seen pictures in some of the droughts we have here in America, like in Texas, when whole lakes dried out, and you can see the fish had been cooked in the hot mud that was left remaining. So I think it's something like that he's describing. He describes the area of southwest France being severely visited by this around Navarre, from the distress, from the fire in the sky, which is what the sun has become. So there are great droughts. He talks about the rising of oceans, and they rise in one prophecy up to the approaches of Paris. One of the most vivid of his prophecies about this is the great city of the maritime ocean, surrounded by a swamp of crystal, in the winter solstice and in the spring, will be tried by a frightful wind. Now, when you're in the 16th century, in fact, that's what a scholar of this kind of prophecy has to think. You have to understand, you have to put aside your 21st century biases and see the world that you've never seen or even imagined from a mid-1550s mindset in France. So we take for granted cars and planes and things, and that our skyscrapers kind of look like a swamp of crystal. It could be the way someone's trying to describe perhaps Hong Kong in a typhoon during a dreadful wind, given that some of these months that he's indicating would not be in our hurricane season in the North Atlantic, but would be in the typhoon season, the early part of it. So the swamp of crystal it could also be, the swamp of crystal could be Louisiana or New York, which is kind of in swampy lands that is beset by the same terrible winds. So these are just a few. There are dozens of prophecies about climate change.